Well, concerned about the growing threats to democracy in West Africa, 40 civil society organizations in the sub-region have come together to strengthen the defense of democratic governance. The West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADEMOS, was formally launched in Accra, Ghana.
Between 2021 and 2022, constitutionally elected governments were overthrown by military regimes in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. In other countries like Côte d'Ivoire and Togo, governments attempted to extend their staying power beyond their constitutional mandates with varying degrees of success. Other democratic infractions in West Africa include curtailment of individual freedom and human rights through internet blackout at the height of violent protests, arbitrary arrest, and suspected fraud in elections in countries like Niger and Senegal. These are in addition to the threats by insecurity as well as poverty and illiteracy. This gathering of civil society organizations from West Africa is to forge a common front to confront the growing threats to democracy.
WADEMOS is a voluntary association of non-governmental, non-partisan civil society actors in the ECOWAS region. The primary purpose of WADEMOS is to build, strengthen, and sustain solidarity and collective action among our membership for the purpose of promoting, supporting, and strengthening democratic development and democratic governance in the region.
Freedom House's 2019 Freedom in the World report shows that of the 12 worst performers, countries with the largest year-on-year score declines, 5 are in West Africa. That is Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, and Nigeria.
Representatives of the regional organizations, ECOWAS, and African Union acknowledged the threat to democratic governance and spoke of some of the measures being taken to checkmate the trend.
The region is increasingly witnessing democracy eroding practices, including acts of strategic retreat from democratic norms, the manipulation of democratic norms, weaponization of the judiciary, and the instrumentalization of security agencies and identity to silence and marginalize opposition and dissenting voices, including civil society and the media.
At the Accra launch of WADEMOS, a number of factors were identified to facilitate civil society accomplishment of its goals.
And other at-risk activists, human rights campaigners, and the others that continue to face repressive legislation and other authoritarian attacks in their various countries. These include some of our members. We committed to focus our energies and resources in the short term on countries that have experienced recent democratic collapse and are in the midst of a political transition to restore democratic and constitutional government.
Well, let's bring in Austin Aigbe, Senior Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development, to talk more about democracy here in Africa. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight tonight.
Thank you so much.
Now, military incursion, it almost feels like there is something in the air here in West Africa. Taking a look at the countries that have been affected. Now, we understand that the military taking over in some of those cases does not mean that you're not happy with democracy. They're just stepping in to bring some form of order, as it were, being that things have fallen apart. But I understand that before things go bad, the red flags are always there, as this report has also pointed out as well. Now, I just want to find out, is there some kind of peer review? I'm talking about the role of ECOWAS in all of this. Is there some kind of peer review that ECOWAS can employ in order to ensure, to assess governance so that things do not go bad, to check those red flags before we have the military takeover? It's always a different discussion getting them out of the way at the end of the day. What is your take?
Thank you for having me. Let's stay with ECOWAS a bit.
Yes.
Usually we put a lot of emphasis on ECOWAS. ECOWAS is headed by the heads of government. the same heads of government who perpetuate this democratic backsliding.
True.
So what is the challenge is, recently there was a meeting where they talked about term limit. And Cote d'Ivoire, and in fact, Senegal, it pains me for Senegal, maybe we'll have time to talk about Senegal, said no. Don't talk about term limit, even though Nigerian president and Ghana president have said, no, we're okay with our term limit and we're good to go. The challenge is that ECOWAS, as it were, it's dominant by these same forces who want to remain power. It's difficult to then say, leave, because will Nigeria tell Senegal to leave? Or will Ghana tell Cote d'Ivoire to leave? Of course, no. So it's the basic challenge. ECOWAS does know those democratic backsliding. It's clear. In Burkina, it was clear. In fact, in Mali, it was clear. It was clear that the trajectory was heading towards something that could be very detrimental. In Guinea, one of the very fantastic things about Guinea was that when the military took over, there was an euphoria in the street. But right now, the euphoria is down.
Right.
The military has failed.
So clearly there's no one to check the checker. Let me put it that way.
You need a citizen to check the checker. But in this case, you are relying on ECOWAS. ECOWAS can't check. ECOWAS is not a dog. It can't, I mean, it's a dog, but it can't back.
Can't bite.
It can't
can
bite.
only bark. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, now, hearing from Guterres, UN Secretary General, he actually said epidemic of coups. That's how he described them. But can Africa really evolve the kind of democracy that reflects its peculiarities? In Nigeria, there was a time when we talked about homegrown democracy. Is that what will deepen democracy? And, you know, a lot has been said about the socio-cultural, you know, differences and all of that that affect the democracy that we understand that the West practices. How do we deepen democracy in this part? And is it only military rule that's a threat to democracy, really?
You know, it's like asking that if you speak local language, don't speak English. I mean, speak local English. You want to practice democracy? Practice democracy. Democracy has some set of norms.
Right.
And those norms is what is generally referred to as democratic dividends. Rule of law, governance that is improved, roads, infrastructural development, human capacity enhancement. There are certain bases that speak to democracy. When those bases are out of it, don't forget, I mean, maybe just let me put this quickly. It is not just in Africa. Hungary had issues. In fact, the ECOWAS Parliament has sanctioned the country that they were already heading towards democratic backsliding, and they sanctioned the country. If that stays, Hungary is going to face financial crisis. Including Myanmar too. Exactly. Yes. So that's something that ECOWAS ought to be able to do, but the way ECOWAS is structured is not the same way the ECOWAS Parliament is structured, where you have heads of government who like to perpetuate themselves in government. I'll give you a story about Senegal. That's why, let me quickly put it in. In 2012, privilegedly, I was one of those who had supported the end to President Wada's regime because he wanted to continue on the third term. And then we had young folks across the globe using songs to change the narrative in New York, in Geneva and elsewhere. And then the people stood and said, no. Then they came to this president who came and said, 7 years is too much. Why do you need 7 years for presidency? Let's make it 5 years of 2 term. He made it 5 years of 2 term. Suddenly, he realized that 5 years of 2 term was too small. So he needed a 3rd term. Why? Heads of government. So you want that individual to change the narrative. He wouldn't change it. So what we can do, but...
Yes. My question was, are military coups really the only threat to democracy? Are there other underlying factors that are giving
military
rise to military coups?
Is the outcome of backsliding. So, for example, when economy is down, people are hungry, and you see people gradually begin to call for the military intervention. Unknowingly, if you look at history of military in politics of West Africa, specifically in Nigeria, citizens were the one who called military to say, come on, we cannot go again. We are suffering. We cannot buy bread at this cost. We cannot buy fuel at this cost. We cannot live in this environment. We cannot pay this high cost of rent. And the military saw themselves as the savior coming in to deal with the issues. They suddenly realized wow, there's goodies here.
Okay, just before we let you go, let me just bring in this last point here. That's the role of the civil society organizations, because you mentioned something really key. The fact that ECOWAS cannot do much because the same people you're trying to correct are the ones calling the shots on that table. You said the power lies with the people themselves, the citizens. Talk us through how influential civil society organizations, you know, how influential they are in the scheme of things to correct this. Let's take a look at Nigeria, for instance.
Go
ahead. No, take it from there.
Before 1999,
yes,
the military regime.
Yes.
Look at all of the individuals that led the battle against military junta, civil society. But the moment democracy came, we thought we had an end in itself, and civil society went back. The crisis with West Africa, Africa as it were, is the non-influence of society in intervention. That is why we have come up with what is called the WADAMOS, the West Africa Democratic Solidarity Network. What's that all about? It's to provide solidarity across countries. Why Nigeria is important for WADAMOS, I think, beyond others, even though we are interrogating in Mali. In Mali, a civil society just went out to say the military president had done this and we think it's wrong, he's been arrested. That's democratic, that's civic space shrinking. Why is Nigeria important to the West African region? I tell you, if there's crisis in Nigeria, Ghana can't take 10 million people. Ghana can.
That point has been made over and over again.
Can. Right. Or is it Benin that will take 5 million? We need the sustainability of democracy in Nigeria is important for the region and of course the African region.
It's important. It's great you actually make that point, because months ago President Muhammadu Buhari actually said that Nigeria had gone past the years of coups, that is no longer possible in Nigeria. But experts are actually saying that countries experiencing terrorism, insurgency are also more likely to see coups. How did it happen in Guinea? Right.
It is about governance deficiency. How did it happen in Mali? The crisis with the economy. How did it happen in Burkina? So we should, I agree with President Buhari to some degree, maybe 40, 50, 60%, because of the way the military has also been politicized. If you look at the military as well, if you are the CDS or the chief, the army chief or whatever, there's some very powerful being you are, and you're able to politically appoint others. So because of politics, the military is not able to do certain things that they were at that point. The professionalization of the military has tended to reduce him, almost becoming a civic, which is good for us as Nigeria, but that's not what's happening elsewhere. But that is not enough proof that the military will not strike. We know that if the military wanted to strike, they would have struck long ago. But I think the system that has been put in place by way of fragmenting the military barracks and the way the structure is, has helped Nigeria.
But how do we deepen democracy in 30 seconds?
Democratic governance, infrastructural development, human capacity development, reduction of poverty. We need to improve our economy. We need to ensure that students who are out of school are back to school. We need to improve our naira. It can't be 700 naira.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. Austin Aigbe there, Senior Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development.